one final question for you, or one final topic of discussion for you. I know that you are a big admirer of Isaiah Thomas's game, and
Yes.
watching how he has grown in terms of the player he's become here in Sacramento these last 3 seasons of his career. Let me ask you this: where do you think his range is in terms of excuse me, in terms of pay this offseason? Because he's going to be a restricted free agent. We talked to Pete D'Alessandro, Kings GM, a couple days ago, and he said,
Mhm.
yes, of course, we're going to offer Isaiah a qualifying offer, which will make him a restricted free agent. But what's his value out there? I mean, the numbers show that he is a starting point guard, and the way he carries himself on the court, the way he handles himself with the media, the way he handles himself with his teammates suggests to me that he's a starting point guard, but I'm not so sure that the Kings are quite convinced that he is their starting point guard of the future.
It's so interesting, right? I mean, the fact that he's small is going to be held against him every time his contract is up, every time his name is mentioned in trade rumors or whatever. Like it's been his whole life, and the numbers say one thing, the perception is a different thing. And part of it is valid just because a lot of GMs think, well, how do we have? I mean, I know he tries really hard on that end, but they think, how do we have a good defense if we have him at the point guard? And I'm not like that's not impossible in my opinion, but the Kings haven't done it. Um, so it's an interesting question. I mean, I would probably be comfortable giving him like $9-10 million a year, but I'm not the GM of an NBA team. I think a lot of it's going to come down to need. I think um, it kind of sucks for him because there aren't a lot of teams looking for a starting point guard in free agency. I mean, the conversation in Toronto all year has been how much will Kyle Lowry make? What's the market going to be like for him? And I think people are generally pretty confident that he'll stay here. And I think people are pretty confident that it won't take, $13 million or $14 million a year to keep him, even though if you look at the numbers that he's putting up, like that's probably what he deserves. Um, but there just aren't a ton of teams with cap space that don't already have a good starting point guard. So you might see the Kings get Isaiah for like, I don't know, $7-8 million a season, which is a huge bargain based on his stats and his production. But it would take essentially another team like maybe I don't like the Lakers or something that are gonna have a hole there in terms of a young point guard unless they draft one um, offering him something and then daring the Kings to match it. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the range because to me it's a pretty wide range. Like I could see anywhere from 7 million a season to like 11-12 million dollars a season, but it just depends on the team.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think the Lowry question is very difficult as well because, I mean, statistically speaking, these two are almost equals. Looking at- if you're looking at both Lowry and Isaiah Thomas, and I mean, at
And the
the end of the
difference is that on the defensive end, I think, regardless of what the numbers say, I think on the defensive end, the perception is that you can trust Kyle to be a very good defender. And I think even if you watch Isaiah and you think he does better than you'd expect, like I still feel like the perception is there is that he's not there, which is why it might like regardless of the numbers, like I feel like Kyle's value is still higher. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no, no, no. I agree with you. I think Kyle's value is higher, and especially because he was named an All Star, and even if it
No, he
isn't a
wasn't though. He was a snub, but that's kind of funny because more people probably talked about him not making it than they
oh
would
no,
have if
that's
he made
true.
it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but you think of him as like a near All Star quality player, and Isaiah
Yes.
Thomas again isn't even in the conversation. I mean, he didn't even get hardly any votes for most improved player. What he finished like 11th place in most improved player, and that just to me it points to one thing. Well, besides the fact that he's 5'9", it points to the fact that the Sacramento Kings didn't win.
Yeah, I think
And
it's the record and the height. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, I think it's kind of it's interesting if you walk up to any coach in the league and you say, "What scares you about tonight's game?" The first thing out of their mouth is Isaiah Thomas is just he's going to light us up.
Yeah, I mean, Greg Popovich has nothing but glowing
Oh
things
yeah,
to say about Isaiah
hmm
Thomas. I mean, I remember asking him about Isaiah when the Spurs were in town the last time, and he interrupted me a little bit, and said, "Hey, yeah, that's your guys' Manu Ginobili."
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's he was saying it kind of like as somewhat of a lighthearted thing, but at the same time, he has that to me. He has that type of potential in terms of his talent. I mean, he's
I think he's
been
incredible.
yeah,
Like the finishes he makes around the basket at that height. Like I don't know that there's anybody else that can do that
yeah,
at his stature. It's insane. And I mean, he's so dangerous on the pick and roll. He I mean, he's always talking about how he's learning the point guard position, and that's I mean, Keith Smart talked about that. I'm sure you heard it, and you heard Mike Malone talk about it over and over about the learning curve and stuff.
Yes.
But like for all that you talk about the learning curve, like I think he's a really smart point guard right now.
yeah.
And I'm not like the perception is what it is. If obviously if the record was different, it would be different. But like I'd trust that guy to run my team. Like I absolutely would. I think he's a really talented player.
Yeah, and you know what too? I think there's a lot of people out there who talk about the things that he doesn't have, like oh
Yeah.
he's 5'9", or oh he's too small, or oh he doesn't play defense. I mean, there are things like defensive skills. I think those things can change. With him, regardless of whatever he doesn't have physically, just the personality that he has, being around him these last few
The
years, and just
heart.
how,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
the heart, the
Yeah.
confidence, the belief that he has in himself. To me, even if he isn't like the perfect point guard that you want right now, I think he's going to work hard enough to at least get as close to his potential as possible.
Well, and how badly do you want to see a guy like that play in games that matter? Like, I
Yeah.
want to see him with the ball in his hands at the end of a close playoff game and
But the
see what
same
he'll
with
do.
Rudy. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
that
Rudy's
as
the
well.
same guy who's always throughout his career been able to hit big shots. I'll say this about Isaiah Thomas. The one thing that I think we can take away, because we do spend enough time with other players on this team, that when you have 3 guys who finish the season at 20 points a game, and one of those guys is a post player that, of course, you need to feed because he's probably the top offensive big man in the game at this moment. And
Hmm.
then another guy is Rudy Gay, who's so silky smooth. And I think that the rest of, we had a 3-man team basically for most of the season. And the remaining, 10, 11 guys on the team look at the guy who's the point guard and say, look, you you can make those other 2 guys look great. You can, DeMarcus is gonna get his, Rudy's gonna get his, but the fact is that if you go get yours, we're all left hungry,
Hmm.
and none of us are getting fed. And that's on you, Isaiah, because you're the guy who's orchestrating the offense. You're the guy who makes the decision where the ball is gonna go. And I think that that's the one thing from the Kings side. I believe that that may be the one thing that hurts him with the Sacramento Kings inside brass is like, look, we know that the fans love him. We know that DeMarcus loves him.
Yeah.
We know that he's a great teammate and everything else. But at the end of the day, can we win with him? And does the other 10 guys, the other 11 guys on the team want to play with him and Rudy Gay and DeMarcus Cousins, or do they not want to because they just aren't going to see any passes? They're just not going to get any opportunity to improve their game, even to maintain their game. And I think that's the question that more than anything else, I think Isaiah left open, and that's the problem that he's going to have in free agency. He
Yeah.
can score, he can get 6 assists, but can he make anyone on his team better that wasn't already great?
But see here, like you talk about that. To me, this is where I say you have to. I would trust in him based on his personality and based on what being around the guy, that he's somebody who could figure that out. There are some players you're around them, you see their talent, you see how good they are, and you're like, oh, okay, he's pretty good, but there's something missing, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily trust him. I wouldn't have like the faith in him to reach the level that this team needs him to be. But when it comes to Isaiah Thomas, I think that he can get there because he's a guy who to me wants to win and understands that if I want to be the best player that I can be, there are things I have to change, and this is something that that I think he he wants to do and will try to work hard on improving.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, what James said, like that's valid, and I mean, I think there's a pretty good argument to make that if you put a guy who is equal in terms of talent and production, but is just plays a slightly different style, that it could be a more balanced team. But it's just hard. It's like you're not getting like 2002 New Jersey Nets Jason Kidd to come like play on this team super easily. Like, uh, can you get Rajon Rondo? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know that you want to just give up on this guy and then try to find another point guard as good as him, because he's really really good. And I think there are other avenues. Like, you can have an efficient offense with these three. I think like. I don't like I've seen them play well together, and some of it might just be, I mean, none of us are in the practices. Like, we don't know like what exactly the plan is. But I mean, I don't think that it's impossible to have this group share the ball and move the ball. Just because DeMarcus is getting in the post, like he's developed as a passer. Like, you can have good ball movement, you can have him attracting attention, moving it, and Rudy's swinging it and whatever. Like, I do think, yeah, like I don't I you would have a much more you'd have a much better idea about the season that Ben McLemore's had than I would. But just from afar, it seemed like when Rudy came in, that did hurt him, just because suddenly there wasn't that scoring role to play. Um, and I get that. Like, I get that when you play with those three guys who all have a usage rate like at what it is and have the amount of shots that they take, it can be hard to like find your place and get yours. But yeah, you're either trusting Isaiah to figure that out, or trusting the three of them to kind of do it collectively and sacrifice, like sort of. I mean, I know they're not as good, but kind of like what happened when they put Wade, Bosch, and LeBron together, who all three were in the MVP discussion the previous year. Like, they ended up figuring out a way to have an offense that is just zipping the ball around like crazy. I so you know I don't think you give up on Isaiah. I would understand making a move if you found an actual like other really good point guard that's pass first. Like, sure, uh, but I'm I know all of like every Kings fan on this planet would be disappointed if they just let him walk and didn't
Oh, they would be
find
crushed.
another. Yeah.
Yeah, they would be crushed.